All right, today we're going to break down a really powerful argument about a fundamental shift in global power. And we're going to start by jumping right into a hypothetical look at the very near future. So just imagine this scene. For the first time in 2 centuries, a hostile fleet sails right into America's backyard. It's a direct challenge to a doctrine that has been the absolute bedrock of U.S. foreign policy for generations. And you'd expect a massive response, right? A crisis, an ultimatum, something. But instead, there's just silence. And here's the kicker. It's not because the world's most dominant military can't do anything. It's because someone ran the numbers and quietly realized the cost is just too high. And that's where this quote just hits so hard. This isn't a military failure in the way you might think. It's the result of a cold, quiet calculation. It's the bill for decades of policy finally arriving. And the payment? Well, it's the death of an assumption, paid for on a spreadsheet. So the real question here isn't about Russian aggression. Not really. It's about understanding the entire system that made this moment the predictable, almost inevitable endpoint of a certain kind of foreign policy. How did we get here? Okay, so let's dive in. The core of this argument rests on 4 big illusions, 4 assumptions about how power works that, according to our source, quietly dismantled the old order and created this whole new reality.
First up, illusion number 1, permanence. This is the big one. It's the belief that the end of the Cold War wasn't just a victory, but a permanent state of being. That American dominance wasn't something you had to constantly work to maintain, but was just the new law of physics.
And you can see how this played out. NATO expansion stopped being just about defense and started being about preventing any future rivals from even getting off the ground. Alliances became a way to show off your reach, not to actually defend anything. And the crazy part is, what looked like a brilliant strategy back in 1995 had, by 2015, become a massive structural failure. A weakness just waiting to be exploited. All right, illusion number 2, the idea of coercion and isolation. This is the belief that you can wage economic war in a vacuum. You know, that sanctions are this clean, surgical tool you can use to inflict pain and get other countries to do what you want without any messy strategic blowback. But of course, that's not how the other side sees it, is it? To them, sanctions don't feel like persuasion. They feel like step 1 of a plan to overthrow their government. So their goal immediately shifts from maybe we should reform to we need to survive. And that pushes them to find other powerful friends and to decide that a strong military is their only real insurance policy. This brings us right to illusion number 3, ideological framing. This one's a classic. It's when you stop analyzing why your rivals are doing something in their own self-interest and you just write it off as them being the bad guys. You know, they're not aligning for strategic reasons. They're aligning because they're all authoritarian. But the reality is, when a country's back is against the wall, they're not choosing partners based on shared values. They're doing what our source calls survival math. If you cut them off from Western markets, they have to find alternatives. It's not a choice, it's a necessity. So Russia showing up in Venezuela isn't about ideology, it's structural reciprocity. In plain English, it's a tit-for-tat move. And finally, we have illusion number 4, exceptionalism. This is the belief that it's, well, different when we do it. You know, the idea that there's one rule book for the US and a totally different one for everyone else. So with this mindset, US bases halfway around the world are defensive, but Russian forces near their own border are aggression. Now look, you can make that claim, but a double standard like that requires constant enforcement. You have to be willing to pay the price to maintain it. And in a world with multiple major powers, the political will and the money for that kind of enforcement has pretty much vanished. So you add up all these broken illusions and you get what our source calls the isolation playbook. It's a brutally simple and repeatable pattern of escalation, one that seems to run on autopilot without anyone ever stopping to check if it actually works. And it goes like this. Step 1, you isolate a country economically, and the first people who feel the pain are ordinary citizens. Step 2, does the government collapse? Nope. The regime hardens. It tightens its grip on power because now it's in survival mode. And that leads to step 3. It looks outward for protection, seeking foreign alliances and weapons to deter any threats. It's a predictable chain reaction. And this isn't some abstract theory. This is history. We've seen this movie before, over and over. Cuba in the 60s turns to the Soviets. Iran hardens after 79. North Korea goes nuclear in the 90s. Russia pivots to China after 2014. Different countries, different decades, same exact outcome. Isolation doesn't lead to capitulation. It leads to militarization. And all of this has brought us to a really profound structural shift. A new era where the exact same logic America once used to justify its own actions is now being used by its rivals right back at them. I mean, think about it. Back in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the U.S. logic was crystal clear. Foreign missiles near our shores are an existential threat, and they have to go, because proximity destabilizes everything. Well, fast forward to today, and that's the exact same argument others are making. They're not being provocative. They're just holding up a mirror and demanding symmetry. So, where does this leave Washington? Well, the old assumptions are shattered, replaced by cold calculation, which means the U.S. doesn't have endless choices anymore. In fact, there are really only 3 constrained paths forward, and none of them lead back to the past. Let's break them down. Path 1 is enforcement. Just double down on everything. More sanctions, more pressure. The likely result? Your rivals dig in even deeper. Path 2 is decline. Just accept the new reality. But the risk there is that weakness becomes the new normal. And finally, path 3 is reversal. You actually ease the pressure to take away the reason rivals are militarizing. This is the only path that restores strategic choice. But, and it's a huge but, it requires admitting the old policy failed. Whichever path is chosen, the message is clear. The era of uncontested dominance is over. Which leaves us with a final and pretty chilling thought. The global system is already calculating the odds on the next big assumption that's about to break. The only question is, will we see it coming this time? Or will we just wait for the next invoice to arrive?